This is Harvey Peters, and he's going to talk about the resolution process, which is a very interesting and useful process to help resolve problems without necessarily going into them in a lot of detail.
I developed this model probably 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, I was running an outdoor pursuit company, which was very complex, had lots of issues, human issues, management issues, what have you. And I lived in London. And the business was in Wales, and I would have a 3-hour train journey. And I would go to Wales, run the business, then come back. And on the way back, I had all of the stuff that had taken place while I'd been there and all of the accumulated problems that people had. And it was overwhelming. So I would sit in the train, and initially I would just write down all the issues. And then later on, I started to write down how I felt about these issues. And some of the issues were really complex and outside of my pay grade. And so I wrote down the emotions that I was feeling. And then I had this idea, I don't know, it just came to me one train journey. What if I just listed all of the emotions that I felt about a particular issue? Maybe a staff had left very angry and it had affected all the rest of the staff, and I had to come up with a solution and I didn't know. So I wrote down all the emotions that were attached to this. I was sad, I was panicking, I was angry. And what surprised me was it wasn't 4 or 5 emotions. There might be 10, 15, maybe even more different emotions. And I came to the understanding, once I'd written down the whole content of this issue, I'd feel neutral. I hadn't solved the problem, but I feel kind of empty. And I started to think about it as if it's a bowl that held all of these emotions. And what I was doing was just giving them labels and taking them down and writing them down. Then I decided these were what we call associated states. I was experiencing this anger, this despair, this whatever. What would happen if I looked to find the positive opposite of that feeling, but also the equivalent of it? So anger can have 1,000 shades. I'm very angry with you, Roland. You didn't call me. To I'm angry with you, I'm going to kill you. I realized I needed to put the positive opposite, but it also had to be the equivalent. It shouldn't be bigger or smaller, just to balance it. And then the insight I had was once I'd got this positive opposite, and it didn't matter what it was, I needed to associate with it. I needed to remember a time when I had this feeling, this emotion, and remember it vividly. And I would remember it vividly and tick. And I'd work my way down this list of negative emotions, these labels. And at the end of it, I would then write freely because no one was going to look at what I was writing. So I could swear, it was private and personal. I'd write all my feelings and thinking about the issue, that it wasn't enough to just express what I felt about it. I needed to create an action, do something. Because if I didn't, a part of me would not rest. The situation would come back and I'd still feel anxious. But if I created an action plan, even if the action plan was, I'm not going to do anything, it's still an action plan. Right. So I developed this model. It really worked for me. I used to use my train journey to work on lots of different issues, work issues. And then I started to use it on my personal issues, conflicts, children, wife, all sorts of things that were often overwhelming. And I found that I was getting really useful answers and answers that were applicable to me. And one of the things I'd realized in my business was that A solution that you arrive at is worth 1,000 solutions that someone tells you.
Right.
And so it became a very powerful tool. And after a few years, I started using it as in my training business with businesses. I was very clear this was not going to be therapy. I had worked with psychologists, so I had great respect and did not want to go into that territory. So, what I liked about the tool was that it was something that an individual could do for themselves once I'd shown them how to do it. And nobody needed to know what the issue was. I could work with a person, and I often would encourage them not to share with me what the issue is because I didn't want to get connected to it. I wanted them to have that thousand experience of finding their own solution. It worked really well. And I learned quite a lot of things when I started working with groups. One of the things I learned was that if a person got bored or irritated while they were doing the process, I would just let it go. And I realized they just weren't ready to do it. And it wasn't my job to impose it or insist. If they were ready to do it, it would flow. If it didn't flow, that just was a very clear indication let's not go there because I'm not doing therapy. So that was one of the learnings. And the other learning I got was how to help people. Even though I didn't know what the issue was, I would pay attention to them when they were listing all their negative words. I realized that often a person would say, yes, they'd come up with 7 or 8 negative words and say, yeah, that's it. And I would know instinctively looking at them that
Mhm.
it wasn't, there were
Right.
more. And so I
Right.
would say to them, look, just imagine there's a bowl with these labels in it. There's still more in that bowl. Invariably, they would reflect and then come up with 4 or 5 new labels. And the other thing I learned was that never let someone go into the label. So someone would say, I'm grieving, and the reason I'm grieving, and I would say, I don't want to know. We're only looking at labels. We're not looking at why that's a psychologist therapist. It's just a label. And I'm doing mental mathematics with you. You've got this negative experience, that the label that you can feel and taste and hear. I'm giving you the positive opposite, and you put the two together. And what happens is you don't get a positive experience. What you get is the connection of something that's positive and that's negative, and that's a different experience. That's a different sense. And for me, I would call it that's wisdom. When you have a negative
Right.
experience, you balance it with the positive, you then have insight. And so I did this with people, and I was often really surprised at the insights that they had. And then I guess I let it go. I was doing other things and so on. And then a couple of years ago, while I was in Zambia, I realized that there was a massive amount of people in Zambia who have no access to any sort of therapy, any sort of tools to help them get insight. And that this was a kind of 80-20. It was 80%. It wasn't the 20% that is a therapist would give and so on, but it could deal with lots of issues that people have been carrying for a long time because there's nowhere to go to.
Right.
And if you do go and have to share what this trauma is, you're making yourself vulnerable. My goal, in a way, is to share this tool because it's very simple so that people can get insight and understanding for issues maybe that have been going on for decades for them and they've just pushed down. So it's an exciting time.
So give me a sense of how the whole process works. What's the tool like? what is the kind of questioning, the way that you would be inviting a person to do this without necessarily asking them to tell you what the big issue is?
So I would, if I've got a group, I will give a short background to how this model works, that it does work,
Hmm.
and it's for them to use. In the exercise, normally we will say you'll work with a partner, and you can share your issue with the partner if you want, but I would strongly recommend you don't, so that you start to understand how effective the tool is. But if you want to, that's fine. Then I would usually get a volunteer and I would sit with them, and we had a pre-printed page of. In Europe, I found people have a large vocabulary and they can arrive at 15, 20 words. In Zambia, I found most people, English is not their first language. So that was my first lesson, was that I was expecting them to have a very complex vocabulary, but actually it isn't their first language. It would be Nyanja or Bemba. So we started to create negative and positive words so that they could look at a list and get help. And we did them in Nyanja and Bemba. And that really was kind of a breakthrough, because I had been working away, trying to present the whole thing in English and getting, I was getting a response, but it wasn't what I
Right,
was
right.
used to.
Hmm.
And only when I realized, actually, you're asking people to communicate in not their preferred language. So I would demonstrate, get someone to come, not to share their problem, but maybe to reveal it afterwards. And we would work, and I would work through it. And the key thing I would be challenging people about is, have they got all the negative words
Okay,
out?
right, right.
And then the other thing is, when they're looking at the positive, so here's a negative word, here's a positive word. Are they really remembering a time when they had this positive experience, and are they reliving it vividly? Because it's really important. It's mathematics, it's mental mathematics. You've got a negative experience, you've got a positive experience. It doesn't work unless they're equal. And then you put them together, that gives you insight. So you have to have the discipline. And it's tiring sometimes. If you've got a big issue and you've got 10, 15 words, you kind of, oh God, but you have to stick with it. And each one, the person needs to really connect to the positive against the negative. And that's where you, as the person who's working with them, can really help. Can say, I'm not sure that that you really do have that positive brain. Or you see them light up and say, yes, I can remember. Okay, we can tick that and move on. So you're helping people to learn how to use it for themselves. Later on, they don't need to have somebody working with them.
So let me ask a little bit more about that, about
Yeah.
how do you invite the person to really experience a positive emotion, particularly if that's not an easy experience for them. If they're much easier for them to focus on the negativity, for them to get caught in the negativity. So some people, they struggle to find that inner experience of a good experience.
That's one of my warnings. Deeply depressed people should not use this model, because they won't be able to access a positive, and it'll just reinforce the negative in them. So I've learned the hard way, do not use this model with somebody who's in deep depression, because they won't be able to find a positive experience, and it'll
Okay.
just reinforce their negative. You are not a therapist. So if someone is deeply depressed, actually they won't want to use the model anyway, but if they do, try and get out of it as quickly as possible, because it's not going to work.
What about somebody who's very anxious and is trying to get it right and gets very kind of like picky about it, or tries to find exactly the right word and they can't find the right word and they
Yeah,
start to get very mental.
it, I always say, look, everything is right. It doesn't matter. There is one of the things you mustn't do is the dictionary opposite. So if you're sad, happy, that's not allowed. I'm people, and so I want people to access the intuition. So if here's my I'm sad, this particular, and I call it labels. The first label is sadness. So now I want them to use their intuition. So what would be the positive opposite equal to that sadness? Remember a time. Remember, it could be anything, and it can be a walk in the park. It can be singing in the choir. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to make, and it shouldn't make sense to anybody else except you, because
Okay.
it's your positive opposite, and when you become good at it, it'll just pop into your consciousness. Oh, yes, it's that yellow bird that was sitting on the tree yesterday.
Oh, that's lovely. Yes,
What
that's great.
what is what has that got to do with anything? But it makes it's that level of joy or what have you that balances. It has to be. You don't have an extreme joyful experience for a minor negative one, and you really, really reinforce these are labels. So you never go into the label. You never explore why the person is angry, sad, disappointed, what have you. And they may want to. That's therapy. This is mathematics.
I'm not sure that it's mathematics, but that's an interesting way of explaining it. So, give me some examples of where you yourself might use it or where you would suggest other people to use it.
Okay, I can. I've just used it in the last couple of days. Yeah, okay. I'll share both the stories. One story was my wife was telling me about a friend who's set up an orphanage, and I'd worked with supporting another orphanage, but she was telling me about these orphans who had been terribly molested, and I was so shocked. I was completely. It was different to my normal experience, and I realized, oh, I don't, this is really upsetting. I wish I hadn't heard this,
Right.
and so she left, and I'm left with this feeling, and I thought, but this is real.
Mhm.
Why you need to face this and understand it and put it into a context for you. So I used the resolution, and I wrote down what I was experiencing from what she had told me. I was shocked. I was angry. I I was in denial. I was frightened. Uh, I had maybe about 12 negatives until I got to neutral, and then I went down the list, finding my positive opposites and remembering a time when I had them. Uh, and some of those times went back 60 years. I might
Wow.
use them time and time again. I mean, one of them is sitting in a restaurant in San Francisco overlooking the sea. And it was so wonderful and peaceful. I used that memory. I had no idea that memory was going to be used over and over again as a positive
All right.
experience. So I could vividly remember that. So I went through the list, and I've been around a long time, so I've got quite a large collection. So at the end of doing all these words, and there were 20.
Wow.
I mean, here's some examples. It's so awful. And my positive opposite was singing. So my conclusion after this was you are part of this world. You have responsibility. You should follow your guidance. You should be without judgment, be firm, clear, act without hatred, contribute. So that was such a completely different
Right.
frame than the ones I started with. Then what I should do is meet this lady, visit her orphanage, and weep for this suffering. It's okay, it's a purge. So
Right.
that was just wonderful. If someone had said to me, oh, Harvey, just go meet this lady and weep, what? So that was
That's very beautiful, Harvey. That's lovely, actually.
so. I mean, and here, I'm an old man, and yet I was shocked and I couldn't cope with it. And I know that the norm for me would have been I'll just retreat off of this, and by tomorrow, the energy in it will have dropped and I
Right,
won't feel
right.
so bad. So it was just a wonderful experience, to not deny it and be able to go into that. So that's one. Oh, yes. I I had run this program and I'd been telling the group about giving feedback and not being judgmental and da da da. So I said, at the end of the 2 week program, I'd like you to give me some feedback. All the other trainers, they scored 10 and they scored me 7. I'm supposed to be okay with that because I've taught them about how you give feedback and so on. But I wasn't. I was really upset. I thought, how come I only got 7? And just as the day wore on, I just became more and more kind of upset by this. Why did I only get 7? I thought, this is ridiculous. You're the person who's teaching them to be specific, and they are specific with you, and now you don't like it.
Right, right.
You're massively incongruent. This is not good. So I did the resolution on that. There was some great positives and things. I was let down. I was wrong. I was too involved. I was hurt, not professional, too fast. Less is more. Anyway, da 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 da. And what I got from it, which was so, I got, this is a learning. You're still good. You need to enjoy, do more, less intense, follow up with one of the staff. You did the best you could, and well done. Remember the wonderful bits. And I was so pleased with myself because I thought I haven't, I got that feedback I didn't like, and now I've embraced it, and it's okay. And actually, I was really grateful because if they'd scored me 10, I would not have gone through this process to understand how do I approach the work that I do. So there's two different examples so one was very much about work and the other was very much about the world at large and how do I fit with it.
Mm. With this group, you've been teaching groups, haven't you, to do it?
Yeah.
What have you seen in terms of actually changes or people getting to? Because you're not necessarily working with very sophisticated people, are you?
There was a lovely incident. I took some students with me and I trained them in the resolution. I say trained them, we ran a couple of sessions together. And then we went to this church and we did it with one of the group was a member of a church. We went and there were 20 parishioners. And what was lovely at the end of it, what was also great was that it was men and 50% men, 50% women, and that half of them had not revealed what the issue was they were working on. I was really pleased with that. One of the men came up and said to me, this is so important. I'm going to take this home and do it with my wife. One of the things one of the things I always say with a resolution, this is something you do with somebody. You do not do it to them. You're not there to train them. You do it with them. You share it with them, but you are not the one who's doing the resolution. Because if you are, then you take on all sorts of dynamics of their problem and what have you. It's a sharing, not a teaching.
So how do you see it kind of developing? Because you're working with, like you're talking about a church group. How would you love it to develop? How would you like it to be used? What would be your vision for it if in the
I
future?
think how I would love it is, I think, twofold. I would like to see it going into communities, going into villages in really simple form so that people that they get a chance to have this experience to use it and have some insight that is not controlled by others and not controlled that they can then use with their religion. I mean, I remember talking with the Catholic Church and saying how I see this as a tool for different religious groups is that once a person has got insight into their issue, whatever it is, they can then surrender that. And they can surrender that in the form that their particular church takes. So,
That's
you know,
very
they
nice.
can now they can instead of having I'm so like they can take. So this is it, God. I've realized, blah 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 blah, and now please, I can hand it over for God to deal with. And I think that for many people, their spirituality is often limited because they're stuck with these issues. Whereas if they can literally surrender them, then whatever religion or movement they're in, that can that can take place, and then they can move on. Life is a journey where you resolve one thing and then a new thing comes. That's why we're here, I think.
See, you want to see it more developed in a kind of communal form.
I'd like to see it communally. And then the one thing that has dogged me and I haven't been able to do is find a way to do it electronically, digitally, so that it could be, because that's not my field. I'm good with my mouth, but not necessarily my technical ability. I would just love it if we could design or develop an interactive tool so that you can also train students who I've been working with. It's a way for them to develop their communication skills and so on and share them and become, and many of them are in different religious groups and they can share that. So it could spread. My sense is if it is ever going to take off, it'll be a slow and then it's like a chessboard. You put one grain of rice on the first square, two on the next, and by the time you get to the last square, you've used up every grain of rice in the world. That would be my hope, that it could be like a chessboard. It doubles up each time.
What are your concerns? What are the things that you know need to be in place with this process so that it either doesn't get abused, it doesn't get distorted, it doesn't get turned into something which is not positive or useful for people?
Yeah, that's a good question. But one of the last things that I just mentioned, it is a sharing, not a teaching. So it is really, really important to help people and protect them. You know, people with charisma and power can use it as a way of controlling people. So it has to be made very, very clear. This is a sharing. This is not a teaching for me.
Anything specific while you're doing the process where you've seen it get a little off track, if you like, where the helper is maybe over helping or kind of leading them in ways which are
Yeah,
not helpful?
absolutely. And so it has to be very strong. As a helper, you're only there to look at how the person is responding and question them, not say you're not doing it, but uh, find just watching, paying attention to the body language of the person. Do they look as if they really have accessed something positive? Very good point. You can't stress it enough that the moment you become a leader or a teacher in it, the process will suffer.
Okay, that's really important. We kind of need to really emphasize that.
Yeah, because it is for me, the whole principle of it is you arrive at the insight. And the moment someone else is in there, that insight is contaminated. It's not yours. I have to say, many people want it to be contaminated. They're used to being in environments where people tell them, this is it, you do that. So my fear is that the powers that be in any particular organization where this may be manifest may not like it
Right.
because it is giving people freedom from
Mm.
what is right or wrong. It's their insight and their action and their behavior. And that's all I can hope for. I guess the other thing I'm concerned about is to get more and more in. It's kind of a double bind. I'm saying to people, don't share your story. your question or whatever it is. But at the same time, I want to know, did it work?
Right,
Has it
right.
been helpful? What's it change? So I'm kind of in a conflict there. I want it to work. I want to know that it worked. I also want to reinforce the privacy of it.
So, okay, there's another piece that I was wondering might be a problem, which is once you've got a form, a structure, people will get more rigid. Those people who like to be told what to do, who like to have their step by step. The way you describe it is a much more creative, spontaneous, and intuitive process. What's the difficulty that you might find with people who want to, okay, you do this, now you do this, that's it, now you're done.
The exercise I pretty well do most with most groups when I'm working with them. I get them to walk towards each other, and then the moment they're too close, just stop and recognize. I love it because you have 100 people and they're all walking and they're different distances. And when I do it with some people, they'll come right up to me and I go, no, 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 you gotta.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to say to them, how did you know? How do you know what's the right distance? But you do know. And it didn't come from your head. It came from an inner understanding, an intuition. And that's what I want you to use when you use this model. Not your head, but just be aware that you know. You know when you're too close or you're too far away. You know when it's exactly right. I impress that upon people. The person knows. They know the distance they need to be from a person, but they also know what's the content of their issue. And they just need encouragement. I think a big challenge for people is many of these issues are deep and they have many aspects to them, which is why they've never been resolved. Because it isn't, you hurt me and I'm sad. It's, you hurt me, you destroyed my confidence. You just go on. Those are judgments, but it's I feel this anger, I feel rejected. You can't ever resolve the issue because there are too many. So
Right.
you deal with one or two. So the problem never goes away. Your brother or your sister has rejected you, but that's just one label. When they rejected you, you experienced so many different emotions. I'm alone, I'm sad, I'm grieving, I'm happy. Sometimes on the left hand side, it isn't negative. And people say to me, well,
Ah,
if I've got a positive word on there, is the opposite a negative? And I say, no, it's still got to be both. So you've got, I'm happy that you went away. So what's the positive opposite of that happy? And you have to find it, whatever it is. People say, look, there's a bowl in front of you, and that rejection has loads of labels. I want you to pull the labels out one at a time. I'm sad, I'm angry, and then as you get to the bottom, you're going to find the real words that are left. Those are the ones that the person would say, oh, yeah, no, I'm done now. And you're, oh, no, I don't think so. Have a look again. Oh, yeah, well.
so
And
that's an important piece, which is like when you've got somebody who's being the helper, the supporter of this process, not the teacher, what are the qualities that they need to bring to the process which makes it more likely to be successful?
no judgment, completely neutral, no associating with the labels, no making interpretations or what have you. That's why it's so important. If they know what the problem is, they're going to be going, oh, yes, this happened to me. And, humor, these are labels that, this particular experience created this package of labels and you're taking them out. And as an assistant, all you've got to be sure of is, did they take out all the labels?
All
Are
right,
they,
right.
and you can just not challenge them, but you say, "Are you sure you've got? Or is there not at least one more in there?" Even if you don't know, if that person then goes, "No, no, that's it. You've done your job." And the same when they're doing the positive. Yeah, I took a walk in the park. Have you had the experience? Yeah, I don't think so. You're challenging them, but in a really gentle way. You just want
Right.
them to have that memory and you want it to be as vivid as possible. And so you have to pay attention to it's you're having to pay attention to their body language, their eye movement. Are they alert and alive, or are they kind of, and if they're getting more and more fed up and depressed, it's time to move on. Let's leave this and come back to it.
So
Yeah,
you've got the negatives and you've done all the positives and you've seen
yeah,
them, and then you're wanting to get to that place where they're able to express some sort of
yes.
change and then some sort of action.
Most people that I at this stage that we're going to work with can write, and so you just write, and some people just write 2 lines, 1 line. Other people write pages, you know. So there isn't a right or wrong on this, but it's you're putting down how you now experience the issue, and it's different. Sometimes the issue hasn't been resolved, but it you're seeing it in a different way, and you say, oh, okay, now this is what I need to do. It's a journey, it's not an ending. So
Right.
lots of times what a person gets is an understanding and an overview and a sense. They don't get, oh, that's it, it's done, I can move on. That's why the action is important, because it allows you to make a closure at that point, even if that closure is about now I need to move on to the next phase of it or whatever.
What's the role of the helper in those two pieces? One, what's changed, and then what action?
Well, that's a tricky one, because if the issue has been private, the person should not share their observations and their action unless they want to. Some people want to share their actions. And I'm kind of in two minds with this. Often, if you share a commitment and an action, it kind of reduces the commitment on your part. It sort of reduces the tension around it. Whereas if you don't share it, it's for you to carry out. I guess in the early stages of developing your understanding of the experience, yes, okay, you can share. This is my conclusion. This is my action. Because later on, you as an individual, this is a lifetime tool. This is not a once-off tool. You will use this for the rest of your life, and so the more integrity that you have when you're using it, the better. Meaning, I really commit to putting down all the negative words, really experiencing the positive opposite equivalence, and then writing my conclusions for it and doing it in one sitting. I don't feel that it's particularly effective to stop halfway and then come back. In an ideal world, you complete the session.
Ah, that's very interesting. So how long does it often take?
If you ask me how to get to Crossroads from my house, I'll say you come out of my house, you turn left, and you drive for 10 kilometers. If you ask my wife how to get to Crossroads, well, you come down the drive and you'll see a metal eagle. You turn left there, and then you go along. There'll be a garage on the right, and then after, and so on and so on and so on. So there isn't a right or wrong. It's just some of us do things very quickly. I'm one of those, and some of us do it more measuredly. And my wife is one of those. And there you go. So I think, you know, I can't say what's the right time. I would do it very quickly. But I would challenge people and say, look, be very, very careful. Do not get stuck in your labels. Do not,
Right, right.
you
So
know,
in some sense, you're wanting to keep the process moving and progressing, but at the same time, you
yes,
don't want to rush it or force it. So you're always
yeah.
at a little bit of a dilemma. So if you're doing it, for instance, if you were doing it in a group, like one of the church groups you're talking about, how much time would you leave for that?
I would say the session takes about 2 hours. So that's the introduction, a demonstration, and probably 45 minutes of them doing, and maybe an hour, because they're doing two people. One does the assistant, and then they swap over. 25 to 30 minutes per person once they've been
Okay,
shown how to do it,
good.
but sometimes quicker.
So, any last thoughts? Any last things which kind of come to you about this process? Anything that you'd like to happen? Anything we need to be concerned about?
I would be concerned that somebody might get this model and close it down in the sense of making it an app which you have to subscribe to. For me, my wish for it is that it just goes out there and becomes available to everybody.
Yes, so somebody will try to monetize it, as they say.
Yes. No,
And this is not your intention.
no. My wish for it is for it to spread.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's very nice.
Yeah. That's the key thing for me. I'm too old to make any money out of it now. So it's but
Anyway, thank you very
yeah.
much, Harvey. Any last words before we finish?
Just enjoy it. It's like having a friend that you can go to. Whereas before you'd have these experiences and run away from them or deny them, or what have you. Now they really are your gifts, because life is learning from whatever happens to you. But so often we just haven't been given the tools how to learn from life's experiences.
That's wonderful. Thank you. The resolution process, a simple way to resolve difficult experiences. First of all, confidentiality. This is a private process, a sharing and not a teaching. So you don't have to share the problem or the issue that you're dealing with unless you want to. And you can share only those parts you feel comfortable about. Once you learn the process, you can use it on your own for anything that turns up in your life. And of course, if it doesn't work for you, you just need to let it go. Choose a difficult experience that you want to change and focus on that experience. List and label all the associated negative emotions. You don't have to explore the feelings, just stay with the labels of those emotions and get as many labels and emotions as possible. There are no judgments at all in this process. For each of the negative emotions, you want to find the positive opposite. You find the balanced and positive equivalent of that negative emotion. It may not be what you think it is. It could be a phrase as well as just one word. So it might be, if you're feeling sad is a difficult experience, happy may not be the opposite for you. It could be content. It could be calm. It could be anything else. But make sure that the positive is balanced and equivalent to the negative. Go through every single negative emotion and find a positive label to go with it. And the label is whatever makes most sense to you. For each of the positive labels, you want to recall a positive experience. So you want to have that experience be as real and vivid as possible. Use your intuition, use your inner feeling to find what experience fits best. And try to relive each positive experience in as much detail as possible. Particularly feel that experience in your body. Then you're checking back with the original experience to find out what has changed. What is my experience of it now? And write freely about any new insights, any new understandings, any new attitude. Doesn't matter what it is. And as you write those, make an intention to remember what those things are, what the changes are. Finally, you want to create an action plan. What can you do that will make a difference? How can you approach the issue in a different way in the future? And you want to look for your own unique and individual solution. And in this process, you're going to use your intuition and you're going to let the process flow naturally. Remember, this is a process that you can use anytime for any issue that you find difficult. And as you do it more and more, it will become easier and more natural for you. Thank you.